Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're doing something a little different. A very specialized mission, you could say.
Right.
We're not looking at the huge sweep of Middle-earth's history.
Mm.
Instead, we're zooming all the way in. We're putting one single, grueling chapter under the microscope.
A narrative choke point, really.
Exactly. It's Book 4, Chapter 8 of The Two Towers. We are dissecting the stairs of Cirith Ungol.
And it's such a brilliant choice for a deep dive because this chapter, it does so much more than just move the plot forward. All the sources we looked at, they really frame this as the ultimate threshold. This is the beginning of that final vertical climb into Mordor itself.
It is the absolute point of no return.
No question. The final, treacherous doorway into Sauron's realm.
And you can feel it in the writing. The chapter is, well, it's arguably the most psychologically suffocating part of the entire journey up to this point.
It really is.
So our mission today, it's not just to recap what happens, it's to pull apart the literary mechanics, the core ingredients that make this chapter a complete masterclass in tension.
We need to get under the hood, so to speak. Look at the architecture of fear Tolkien is building.
And the moral choices, the complexity there, and I think, most importantly, how the environment itself is basically weaponized. It becomes this active, menacing force in the story.
That's it. We're moving from the what to the how. What specific techniques did Tolkien actually use here? We're going to isolate them.
So things like the geography.
The sheer soul-crushing geography, yeah. And the tests of courage, of just pure endurance, and of course the fragility of trust in that tiny group.
That trust triangle.
Exactly. So if you're listening, the goal is for you to walk away with some real applicable insights into storytelling craft, not just, a refresher on the lore.
Absolutely. We're opening up the engine. So to get started, I think we have to tackle the first and most obvious antagonist in the chapter, the land itself. Okay, let's start with the stone. Because the geography in the stairs of Cirith Ungol is not a backdrop. It's not just scenery.
No, not at all. It is fundamentally a primary character.
A hostile one.
Oh, absolutely. Our analysis makes it so clear that Tolkien uses this environment as a central antagonist. It's a physical force that's actively trying to break the hobbits before they even see a single orc.
And what's so fascinating is how he does it. He transforms what could be a passive setting into this active, almost malevolent threat.
He does. And the language he uses focuses so obsessively on the physical peril. We're not just talking about a steep path. He describes it as being nearly vertical.
Right.
These stairs, they are basically engineered for death. They're carved right into the sheer cliff face of the Efeldur.
And the level of detail is just incredible. It's not just a hard climb. It's treacherous because of how unstable it is.
Exactly. The source review really highlights those details. The constant presence of jagged stone, the threat of loose rocks that could just tumble down and give them away. And the paths are so incredibly narrow.
Barely a foothold.
Sometimes just a few feet wide. The text makes it explicit that one single misstep, just a moment of exhaustion, means a fatal fall into nothing.
And that constant physical danger, it serves a huge narrative purpose, doesn't it? It anchors the risk in every single sentence.
It does. Every single move they make is high stakes. There's no relaxing, not for a second. They can't let their guard down physically or mentally.
It's different from their journey through the Emyn Muil, for instance. That was hard and confusing, sure, but there were places to rest.
Right. The stairs offer no respite at all. It's just constant agonizing focus. And that sustained physical threat is Tolkien's first line of attack on their willpower.
Which brings us to the psychological side of it. Because the physical peril and the psychological dread, they work together.
They're completely intertwined. The environment isn't just physically hard, it's set up to maximize their internal stress. It's like the landscape itself is running a psychological operation on them.
And the first tool it uses is just darkness.
The total absence of light. It's just that pervasive darkness that just envelops them. They're moving in a world with almost zero visibility, and that just magnifies every fear of the unknown.
And then you add the physical confinement on top of that, the narrow cliffs pressing in.
Which just amplifies the exhaustion and the sense of being trapped. They're not just climbing a mountain, they're in a chute, a literal pipeline leading them into terror.
I even remember the descriptions of the air itself. It's thick, it's cold, it smells of damp stone and something else.
A hint of decay, yeah. Maybe from the valley below, maybe. From what's waiting up top.
So how does Tolkien use the other senses, beyond just sight, to make this place so menacing?
Well, this is where his skill with auditory details is just incredible. He creates this total sensory immersion in dread. The whole environment has an auditory menace. The sources all point to the constant, unnerving sound of the wind. And it's not a nice breeze. It's cold, it's abrasive, and it could be hiding other sounds.
Like footsteps.
Exactly. The terror of hearing distant footsteps that aren't your own, and even the most normal sound, like dripping water.
Becomes terrifying.
It's amplified. It echoes off the cold stone, and every drip rings with threat. The entire soundscape is hostile.
So you have this combination, the exhausting physical danger, the steepness, the loose rock, and then this crushing psychological pressure, the darkness, the echoes, the claustrophobia.
And that's what makes the setting an active narrator. It's a total immersion in dread that's designed to wear them down and force all their internal conflicts right to the surface.
So if we shift from the literal description to the literary craft, the actual technique, this is where the climb becomes symbolic, right?
Profoundly symbolic. Every single step up those jagged stairs isn't just about gaining altitude. It's a clear representation of their slow, agonizing confrontation with ultimate evil.
And with their own inner demons.
With their own temptation, their own fear, their own limits. Absolutely.
So the treacherous path is basically a metaphor for the moral tightrope they're walking.
Precisely. The sources call this symbolic action. The physical danger of the path mirrors the psychological and moral threats inside their little group.
So a misstep on the rock is like a misstep in trust.
Exactly. The slippery, wet rock literally reflects the moral slippage Frodo risks by trusting Gollum. A misjudgment, a moment of misplaced trust, is just as deadly as tripping and falling. The outer journey validates the inner conflict.
Which just elevates the whole chapter. It's not just a plot device to get them from A to B. It's a relentless test of their character.
It really is. It underscores this theme that the journey to resist evil requires painful, constant effort, both physically and morally. The stairs aren't just there by chance, they're a mechanism designed to find their breaking point.
And all that symbolic weight is what gives the chapter its power.
Yeah.
The fatigue they feel. It's not just from climbing.
No, it's moral exhaustion. It's the weight of the ring, the weight of managing Gollum. And the environment gives them no break. It's an amplifier. It turns every fear, every suspicion up to 11.
It's also interesting that the stairs are built. They're carved. They aren't natural.
That's a great point. They represent a kind of old, malicious engineering.
Right. They're a monument to how hard it is to get into this realm.
Yeah.
The idea that someone, long ago, made this path just barely passable for those with evil intent, but terrifying enough to stop anyone else. It adds this whole historical layer of menace.
That historical malice is palpable. They're literally walking on the remains of ancient paranoia. The stone itself seems to whisper of dark strategies. And this relentless assault, physical and psychological, is what forces the tension between Frodo and Sam to a breaking point.
Which is exactly where Tolkien wants us to focus. Because that pressure cooker of the stairs is one thing, but climbing it with someone you don't trust, whose loyalty changes with the shadows, that brings us right to the emotional core of the chapter. So the dynamic between the three of them is it's set on a knife's edge. This chapter is where that fragile relationship between Frodo, Sam, and Gollum is forced into this horrible, inescapable proximity.
It is, and one of them is actively planning the death of the other two.
Right, and the tension, that constant agonizing tension, is all rooted in the massive gap between Frodo's compassionate worldview and Sam's very grounded, pragmatic instincts.
They're trapped in this dynamic where the stakes are life and death, and their basic disagreement about Gollum becomes a lethal liability.
Let's really dig into Frodo's perspective here. He keeps choosing to trust Gollum, or at least to act like he does, even here in the shadow of Mordor.
And this is such a crucial, agonizing part of his moral journey. He's not just being naive. He's driven by this profound need to see the potential for loyalty, to believe in the tiny, shattered piece of Smeagol that might still be in there. It's a choice based on pity and hope and a deep desire not to stoop to the level of his enemy.
Even when everything around him is screaming caution.
Right, and that choice is central to the entire moral architecture of The Lord of the Rings. Frodo's view is tied to the biggest themes of the saga: redemption, mercy, the corrupting power of judging others.
So he's balancing hope and caution.
Yes, but it's more than that. He's making a conscious, immense moral effort to be better than the situation demands he be. His refusal to just, kill Gollum or abandon him, that's the defining moral act of this whole climb.
Okay, but let's push back on that a little. I mean, mercy is a fine ideal, but
Yeah.
isn't Frodo being dangerously naive here?
You could argue that.
He's the ring bearer. His mission is to destroy the ring. Doesn't that mission supersede his own personal moral purity? Couldn't you say Sam is the only one being rational and that the story should really reward his suspicion, given what happens?
That is a fantastic question, and it forces us to really look closer at Frodo's position. It's not just optimism. It's the burden of his knowledge, combined with the ring's influence.
How so?
Frodo, having carried the ring for so long, he understands corruption from the inside. He sees Gollum, and he sees a mirror. He sees what he could become.
Ah, so pitying Sméagol is a kind of self-defense.
It's a form of self-preservation, exactly. It's a moral shield against the ring's total control. If he gives in to malice and suspicion, the ring wins the internal battle long before he gets to Mount Doom.
So this story doesn't reward Sam over Frodo.
No, it ultimately shows that you needed both of them to survive.
So Frodo's carrying this huge moral weight, but his hope is constantly being checked by Sam's realism. Sam is the voice of that natural deep suspicion.
He's the pragmatist. He's the one watching Gollum's every move, never letting his guard down no matter how tired he is.
And he's not just a bodyguard for Frodo here, is he?
Not at all. He's the audience surrogate. Sam is the one who says what we're all thinking. When he voices his concerns, his muttered warnings, it creates this powerful friction in the story. And it validates our own feelings as readers. We know Gollum is treacherous, and Sam confirms it for us. It grounds Frodo's more abstract compassion in a harsh reality.
It's a classic writing technique, isn't it? Using character contrast to create relentless tension.
Absolutely. If they both trusted Gollum, there'd be no drama. If they both distrusted him, they'd just tie him up and it would be a different story. The fact they disagree is what makes the tension unbearable.
And it forces them to rely on each other, even through that friction.
And that friction serves the bigger themes. The climb up the stairs forces them to live out that question. How do you balance trust, which is a virtue, with caution, which is a necessity, when you're surrounded by malice?
It makes the chapter so emotionally rich. And the setting, the darkness, the danger, it just preys on that vulnerability.
It does. Every stumble on the stairs, every scary echo, it just cranks up the stress on their relationship. It makes the gap between Frodo's pity and Sam's suspicion even wider and more dangerous.
Their physical exhaustion just drains their emotional batteries.
Which makes patience, especially with Gollum, almost impossible. It creates these very specific, memorable moments of tension.
Like when Sam catches Gollum looking back at them.
Or Gollum's weird enthusiasm for this terrible path. Sam's descriptions of Gollum are always physical. The thin limbs, the nervous twitching, the gleam in his eyes. Frodo's are always about the abstract. The shadow of Sméagol. The stairs force those two views into a head-on collision.
It's a moral allegory on a high wire. Frodo shows us how hard it is to pity the corrupt when you're just trying to survive.
And Sam shows us how hard it is to stay vigilant when you are just bone-tired. Their dynamic defines the whole moral journey up those stairs.
And all the while they're consumed by all this, Gollum is playing a completely different game.
Far more terrifying one.
So while Frodo and Sam are wrestling with the climb and with each other, we have to look at Gollum. Because as the analysis points out, he is operating on a totally different level.
He is. He's quietly plotting their betrayal. He's focused on the how of their destruction, while they're just focused on the now of their survival.
And this quiet, calculating side of him is what really elevates him as a villain in this part of the story.
It does. He stops being just a nuisance or a symptom of the ring's power and becomes a true strategic architect of evil.
And this is where Tolkien does something really brilliant. He subverts our expectations about Gollum's motives. This is that second technique we wanted to talk about. Layered villainy.
Right. We tend to think of Gollum only through the lens of the ring, that single-minded obsession to get his precious back. He's the addict.
He's a victim of it, in a way.
Exactly. But the sources all stress that in this chapter, his motivation gets much more complex. It's layered. The treachery here isn't just the ring wanting to get back to Frodo. It's a means to an end tied to a very specific external survival plan.
That's a huge distinction.
It's vital. Tolkien is showing us that even creatures consumed by this abstract evil still operate on a recognizable calculus of risk and reward.
And the key detail, the thing that's just whispered in the text at first, is the introduction of her, this mysterious, terrifying power that Gollum is trying to serve.
That's the pivot. The reveal that her is Shelob, the giant spider, it introduces this second ancient layer of power into the plot. It's not just about the ring bearer versus the ring thief anymore.
It puts Gollum in a hierarchy of fear.
A clear one. He's not the apex predator in this situation. He's more like a low-level operative, sacrificing others to save himself. He has to curry favor with this greater, darker power to survive.
And that changes his motives completely. He's trying to survive by feeding this massive ancient entity that lets him pass through her territory unharmed.
And that survival calculus explains the mix of motives driving his plan. It's not just ring lust. First, there's just pure survival instinct. He needs to live, and he knows Shelob demands tribute. So sacrificing the hobbits is just a necessary cost for his own fragile existence.
That's tied into his fear, right?
Deeply. There's his fear of Sauron and the orcs, sure, but the more immediate fear is of Shelob herself. She's older and, in some ways, more terrible than the Dark Lord. He's choosing what he sees as the lesser of two evils, betraying his companions instead of facing her wrath.
It adds this chilling, almost rational logic to what he's doing.
It does. He's using his local knowledge. He knows about these old, unguarded paths and the ancient evils that live there to create a strategy. It's not the ring screaming, "Take me!" It's Gollum whispering, "Save me and I will feed her."
Which makes you think about the nature of evil in Tolkien's world. By including Shelob as this separate ancient power, is Tolkien suggesting that evil isn't always top-down, like from Sauron?
I think so, absolutely. Shelob represents a primal, unthinking evil. It's older than the rings, and Gollum, in his terror, is trying to align himself with that local power structure. It makes his betrayal so much more compelling than if he just jumped Frodo for the ring.
It moves the motive from simple greed to a desperate, calculating act of risk management.
By a character who is just fundamentally compromised.
So the sources are saying this makes Gollum more than a simple villain. He's not some cartoon.
Not at all. He's a complex product of two things. The ring's corruption, which destroyed his moral compass, and his own fractured psyche, which allows him to make these strategic, self-serving, and terrifying choices.
And that fractured psyche, the whole Smeagol-Gollum argument, it seems to unify here.
It does, but it's unified by desperation and fear. They're both focused on the common goal of using the hobbits as bait. And that calculated choice, born from his need to please Shelob, makes his treachery so much more engaging. Because it's rooted in things we can all understand, like fear and self-preservation.
Which is ironic. We can almost relate to his motive, even if the action is monstrous.
Exactly. The tragedy is that he's trapped between this cosmic evil of Sauron and this localized horror of Shelob, and his only way out seems to be a betrayal fueled by the primal fear of death. The Stairs chapter is where that fear finally hardens into a lethal plan.
And that depth of characterization is just a testament to Tolkien's skill. By adding Shelob into the mix, he ensures Gollum stays this psychologically resonant, ambiguous figure, not just a plot device.
He becomes a fully realized, morally gray, tragic character trying to navigate these monstrous power structures that are way beyond his control.
And this complex understanding of Gollum, built on the foundation of that punishing geography, is what makes this chapter a writer's playbook, which I think is a good place to shift our focus now to the structural and technical lessons. Okay, so this is where it gets really fascinating for anyone interested in writing or just, how great stories are built. We're moving beyond the plot and focusing on what the sources identify as the specific techniques that make this chapter a true masterclass.
Right. It's about the chapter's structural function. It exists to basically max out the emotional and psychological pressure right before the big climax with Shelob. And Tolkien does that with just meticulous control over the setting, the pacing, the character dynamics.
So let's start by going back to that first major technique, the use of environmental tension. We talked about the geography, but as a craft technique, what's the key lesson here?
It's about deliberate pacing and specificity. He slows the narrative way, way down. The climb could have taken a few sentences in a lesser book, but here it's stretched out over pages.
And that slowness mirrors their effort.
It forces you to feel it. We don't just read that they're tired. We're made to feel the cold, slick rock under their fingers, the burning ache in their legs, the terror of the path just disappearing into a black void.
So the jagged stone and the narrow path, they become constraints that force every decision.
Every single one. Whether to speak, whether to rest, whether to trust. It proves that geography isn't passive. It's a critical tool for cranking up the emotional stakes.
And that power is amplified by that second technique we discussed, the layered villainy.
Exactly. By taking the time to detail Gollum's complex motives, the fear of Shelob, the survival instinct, on top of the ring compulsion, Tolkien avoids making the conflict simple.
It makes the betrayal feel earned. Tragic, but earned. Not just a plot twist.
And it keeps you, the reader, engaged in the why. For any writer listening, a villain with complex fears is always, always more interesting than one just driven by greed. Gollum is operating under a calculus of risk management. He's horrifying, but he's also terribly compromised.
Which lets you have a flicker of pity that makes the eventual malice even more shocking.
Then you have the engine of Technique 3, which is the relentless power of character contrast between Frodo and Sam.
Their opposing views. Frodo's faith versus Sam's suspicion.
They are deliberately pitted against each other to create this constant natural tension.
Yeah.
It ensures that even when nothing is happening, when the path is silent, the narrative is still volatile.
And that contrast gives it depth.
Yeah.
Sam's caution is like a psychological release valve for the reader, right?
Yeah.
It stops us from just yelling at Frodo for being naive.
It does. It makes sure the emotional dynamics are always shifting and deepening. It turns what could be a boring march into an internal moral drama.
But the technique that really seals the masterclass status, and the one that's easy to miss, is Technique 4. Symbolic action. You touched on this earlier.
We did, but it's worth digging into. Every physical action, the agonizing climb, a stumble, a careful step in the dark, it's not just movement. It's a metaphor for their inner conflict.
So their physical exhaustion is a visual for their moral fatigue.
Perfectly put. They are physically moving toward the heart of pure evil, and the agonizing step-by-step effort it takes to climb those cold, sharp stairs reflects the massive moral effort it takes to hold on to hope and decency while carrying the ring.
I think we need to linger on that effect of exhaustion. The weight of the world, the ring, managing Gollum. It all just becomes one crushing physical feeling.
Yeah.
Tolkien is telling us, through the structure, that courage isn't just a virtue.
No, it's a physical endurance test against impossible odds.
Which leads right into that central theme the analysis identifies. Endurance against darkness.
Yes. Frodo and Sam's determination to just keep climbing, despite the exhaustion and the fear, it fundamentally redefines courage in Middle-earth. Courage here isn't a sudden act of bravery in battle.
It's not about sword fighting.
It's about persistent, agonizing perseverance in the face of the absolute soul-crushing certainty of doom.
They're not doing anything flashy. Their heroism is in the quiet, relentless act of putting one foot in front of the other, heading toward a terrible, unknown place, led by someone they can't trust.
It's the highest form of simple, unassuming heroism. And this relentless, detailed march serves the final, crucial literary purpose, escalating tension and foreshadowing.
Right. Tolkien uses the immediate physical danger of the stairs as a direct psychological prelude to the horror that's waiting in the tunnel.
He does.
So how does he specifically do that? Escalate the tension and foreshadow what's coming?
Through dread and the vague threat of the unseen. The environment is hostile, sure, dark, echoey, narrow, but the actual danger remains unseen. It's only hinted at by Gollum's nervous whispers and his weird insistence on this specific dark path.
So every detail on the stairs is a clue.
Every sensory detail foreshadows what's coming in Shelob's lair. The narrow path mimics the tunnel. The feeling of being trapped mimics the web. The feeling of being hunted mimics the spider's approach.
So the whole chapter is a sophisticated psychological warm-up. By the time they get to the top, exhausted and fragile, we're emotionally primed for the maximum level of terror and betrayal that's about to happen.
Exactly. Tolkien carefully tightens the screws with the environment and the character conflict to make sure that the confrontation with Shelob is one of the most devastating moments in the entire saga. This chapter is the fuse, and he's letting it burn very, very slowly.
It's not just a bridge between two events, it's a crucible.
A crucible is the perfect word, a place where their physical strength and their moral will are tested to the breaking point before the real fight even starts.
It's just a reminder, isn't it? The sheer density of craft packed into one chapter. That sometimes the biggest moments aren't in the battle, but in the agonizing climb beforehand.
And the pacing is so key. He refuses to rush it. He uses those detailed descriptions to slow the reader down, forcing us to share in their exhaustion and fear. So when the betrayal hits, the emotional payload is just maximized.
That sustained, shared dread.
That's where the power comes from.
That focus on sustained dread is what makes it feel so real. Even on a reread, you feel anxious. It's that sense of claustrophobia, that cold stone, that really gets to you.
It does. The sustained detail makes the darkness feel heavy and physical. It's not just an absence of light, it's a smothering presence, a pressure threatening to crush them.
And knowing that Gollum, the one person who supposedly knows the way, is leading them into a trap.
Yeah.
It makes every footstep an exercise in paranoia.
The genius is making the reader trust Sam's paranoia, even while Frodo is making the case for empathy. That push and pull is everything.
And that's so important because, structurally, Frodo has to stay merciful for the quest to have any hope, right?
He has to. If Frodo gives up his pity, he succumbs to the ring's malice, and it doesn't matter if Gollum lives or dies at that point. The Stairs chapter proves that even when the choice seems lethal, holding on to compassion is the ultimate defense against the dark.
That idea that the best defense is compassion, that might be the most profound lesson tucked away in those cold, unforgiving pages.
I think it is. It's the ultimate expression of the thematic weight Tolkien places on the smallest heroes. Their strength comes from their simplicity, their loyalty, and their ability to endure hardship, not with brute force, but with persistent moral and physical courage.
That endurance, that relentless march up, that defines their heroism more than any sword could. So what's the final takeaway here? Our deep dive into the Stairs of Cirith Ungol shows us a narrative where every single element works in this perfect, horrifying harmony. You have the harrowing, active, physical danger woven together with this profound emotional and moral tension, all centered around that core conflict of trust and suspicion.
And we've pulled out the complex plotting behind it, Gollum's multifaceted motives, and the expert use of foreshadowing and environmental tension.
The result is a chapter that acts as this profound crucible. It pushes the Fellowship's smallest members to the darkest, most agonizing point of their journey.
And it prepares them, and us as readers, for the severe betrayal and the test of endurance that's just around the corner.
And for you, the learner, the value here is in seeing those practical, transferable insights into storytelling. Understanding how Tolkien uses a setting not just as scenery, but as an active participant in the story.
How geography can force moral choices.
It's invaluable for any creative work.
The insights are always in the details and the structure. And as we finish up, we're left again with the intense moral complexity of Gollum, which is really the crux of this whole treacherous climb.
Yeah.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. If we accept the analysis that Gollum's betrayal was fundamentally driven by a pure survival instinct, a deep, overwhelming fear of a greater power in Shelob, rather than solely by the ring, does that added layer of rational survival instinct make his actions more tragic, in the classical sense, rooted in desperation? Or does it somehow make his decision to consciously lead the hobbits to their deaths even more morally condemnable, because it involved a clear, calculated choice? It's a fascinating question, and you can feel it echoing in every step of that long, silent, terrifying...